Every now and again, a request comes across my email or in the comment section that really stumps me. I keep a log of all the requests I get. Some I jump on immediately. Others I make a note of to circle back around to later. And then there are a few that I can find very little on, so it takes sometimes months and months of research to put something together. But then there are the rare few that I can find nothing on, nothing at all. I'll log those away, returning to them now and again when I get access to new research material or tools, just to see if I can find anything at all. Today's story started off like that, a subject that I could find very little on. But slowly, over time, pieces of the legend began to reveal itself, and it was one that kept my mind churning and pushed me to dig more and more. That's the hard part with some of these legends. Sometimes these legends are local to specific rural communities, and they're stories that those communities refuse to talk about, stories that are better left forgotten. Today's request was from a viewer that remembered bits and portions of the story from her grandfather. The request was for me to see what I could find, and perhaps bring some closure to the viewer as to what this particular entity may be. No pressure, right? I'll see what I can do, with a little speculation and some humble personal opinion. And as luck would have it, it gives me the opportunity to touch on two other requests that I've received before, Changelings and the Black-Eyed Children. But the main focus of this story is on another child, or an entity that takes the form of a child. One that could possibly, in my thought process anyway, bridge the gap between the changelings of lore and the modern stories of the Black-Eyed Children. That entity is said to live in the dark hills of the Ozark Mountains, and is known as the Tatterdemalion. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. For the most part, the requests I typically get are quick statements. I'd love for you to cover the story of Eli Stroud Cemetery. Or, have you ever looked into the McRaven house? Have you ever thought about doing a video on the Bell Witch? I appreciate each and every one of those recommendations. A lot of the presentations I've done here come directly from those recommendations, and I have a running list of each request I've received and who requested it stored away for future use. I've received comments from family members of some of the subjects we've covered here before too, or people from the locations that either support the stories or even give more information for myself and those of you that read through the comments. But sometimes the requests and comments give me personal encounters, accounts I'd love to do more with. And some of those comments lead me to research that becomes a small obsession. Here is one such viewer's comment. Here in Arkansas, there is so much high strangeness, especially in the Ozarks. My grandpa told a lot of those stories. The Tatterdemalion is one I would love to see you do a video on. I've never seen anyone talk about it. The Tatterdemalion was a lost child in the forest, dirty and hungry, that people would stumble across from time to time, and of course, immediately take home with them. But it's supposedly not a child at all, and legend says you have to kill it. This is disturbing on multiple levels, and I've never reconciled who the monsters in the legend are, because it's a mindfuck of a situation. What this entity supposedly does is make you paranoid, violent, and turns everyone against each other until it destroys the life of the rescuer, either by killing a child or dying to protect the child. So it accomplishes its goal either way. I immediately became obsessed with finding out anything I could about this supposed legend, and that proved to be more difficult than I could have ever imagined. My typical approach is to find at least 4 or 5 sources, as old as possible, then compare similarities, address any differences, and add my own voice and beliefs to the story. But with this one, I found nothing. Not a single thing. My biggest trip up was with the word itself. Come to find out, Tatterdemalion was an old world common term used for anyone in ragged clothing, or anyone that was shabby and unkempt. I soon found myself buried in newspaper archives with articles of vagrants and hobo types being arrested, and after days and days of trying to filter through them all, I eventually just gave up. My next big trip up is the fact that in 2018, a movie was released called The Lost Child. The legend of the Tatterdemalion was largely the subject of the film, so the majority of internet research referred to articles and sites covering the film itself, and there was no indication made in any of those references as to the idea of the movie being based on any pre-existing legend. There were some books with the title Tatterdemalion, one about Jack the Ripper and one about World War I France, but they seemed to use the literal definition of the word itself. There was another book named Tatterdemalion by Sylvia Lindstedt that roughly described the Tatterdemalion as a creature close to the legend, but that was released in 2017 and takes place in post-apocalyptic California. I finally came across some descriptions of a Tatterdemalion that got close to the descriptions from the original comment, but those were related to a role-playing game, Pathfinder, where the Tatterdemalion is a witch-like character, and that game was released in 2009. Then the Tatterdemalion appears in Terry Brooks's Shannara book series, the Tatterdemalion first mentioned in the book A Night of Word, published in 1998. And that was about the oldest mention of the Tatterdemalion that I could find, and I found myself wondering if I was on a wild goose chase or not. Was the comment request that I received simply made up? Or were they a fan of one of those works mentioned earlier, and using that as the pretense for a larger legend? But then I realized I had started to deviate from my normal method of research. Though unrelated, I had some sources in some way. But more importantly, I found myself trying to discount the story as it was presented to me. And as I've always said here, it doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what they believe. So I compiled what I could find and left it alone, only to return to it later with a fresh mind and fresh eyes. Let's take the original comment at face value. Even though the story in the comment could be based on some of the fictional accounts I've already came across, it was presented as being relayed to the viewer by her grandpa. So I told myself that the story from the grandpa had to be older than even the 1998 version depicted in the novels, those being the oldest that I could find. And we all know that a good legend, fiction or not, is always based on something real in some way, and something older than the stories you were telling yourself. So taking all of that material and comparing it to the original description from the viewer's grandpa, this is what I could piece together. The Tatterdemalion seems to be some sort of entity that lives in the deep recesses of the mountain forest, The most common form it takes is that of a small child, at least when it's encountered by wandering humans. It presents itself as a lost child, cold, dirty, and hungry, preying on the human's natural instinct to save and to protect. The most interesting thing about the Tatterdemalion is it can't tell you much about who it is, where it came from, nothing at all. Well, it either can't or it won't. As dedicated as you may be, you get no information that can help you out. No idea how the child got out there in the first place. No contact information for loved ones. No names of the parents. You'll be lucky if you even get the child's name at all. But it's a child, right? What are you supposed to do? Just leave it alone in the wilderness where you found it? So you bring it out of the forest with you, away from its normal domain, and into civilization. It may try to persuade you from contacting any type of authorities for assistance, but at least in this day and age, that's what you're most likely to do. And there is where the Tatterdemalion has a decision to make. It will be able to determine who it will be able to manipulate more, and then it will start its little mind game to make that happen. You see, the Tatterdemalion feeds on the health of its rescuer in a way. Whether that be physical health or mental health isn't 100% clear. In some ways it seems it could be both. As it's pointed out in the 2018 film, the Tatterdemalion leads people to a, quote, flower of decay of the rescuer's life. It begins largely by clouding your own judgment. Your focus ends up being solely on the well-being of the child, and it seems, at least, that the Tatterdemalion's focus becomes entirely on you in return. Whatever spell it has you under seems to be for you alone, as those around you and important in your life never seem affected in the same way. With this being the case, others see through the ruse of the Tatterdemalion. Maybe not in a way where they know exactly what is going on, or what the creature is, but they know that something isn't quite right. They also begin to see the subtle changes in you, but by the time they bring it up, you're completely hooked, and this causes nothing but conflict in your life, mental, emotional, and sometimes even physical, until slowly, those people are cut out of your life, giving the Tatterdemalion your ever-growing focus. The Tatterdemalion's end goal is to destroy your life in whatever way that it can, but it always seems to be a prolonged destruction. This is what leads people to believe that it's feeding off of your energy somehow, physical, emotional, mental. It's never quite clear, but again, it never quite matters. By the time that the Tatterdemalion's job is done, you're left as a withering husk of your former self, perhaps driven completely mad, or left as some brain-dead simpleton to be described away under the guise of some late-onset mental disorder. But what if you're able to figure out what's going on early on? Well, then you have to find a way to get rid of the Tatterdemalion, in one way or another. Best case scenario is that you've contacted the police or something, and that the Tatterdemalion saw something in one of them that it liked better than you. So now it's gone, at least from your life. But it's still set loose to prey on another. But if that's not the case, then you're left to deal with it yourself. So what do? Take it back to the forest and abandon it again? Do you take matters into your own hands and destroy the creature once and for all? What about those around you that have seen it as a lost child? How will you be viewed in their eyes? Or how will you be seen in the eyes of the law? Sure, you'll free yourself from the creature's spell, but what will you do when doubt starts creeping into your mind? What if you were wrong? What if it really was just some strange lost child? How do you reconcile with that in your mind? And even if you're not wrong, you'll probably find yourself convinced it was an evil entity and you were justified in your actions, while finding yourself sitting in a jail cell or a padded room for the rest of your life. So in a way, the Tatterdemalion still achieved its goal. Once a Tatterdemalion chooses you as its victim, it's a lose-lose situation. There doesn't seem to be any way around it. That, unfortunately, always seems to be the case when dealing with things of the unknown, the things that lurk deep in the places of the world that are still untouched by modern civilization, beings that once ruled the earth before mankind sprouted and spread. But what exactly is the Tatterdemalion? Well, no one knows. Anyone that has ever had the chance to come close enough to try to figure out that is probably long gone or locked away somewhere, their words and warnings given no attention at all. So we're left to look at the rare descriptions given to us in fiction in hopes that their lore is somehow based on some sort of fact that they've picked up from here or there. In the 2018 film Lost Child, the Tatterdemalion is an evil entity, sometimes referred to as a demon, that has always existed in rural folklore. A lost belief that only survives in the rural communities of the Ozarks, and one they refuse to talk about. In the novel Tatterdemalion, it's a feral creature that seems to be woven together from various European folk tales that re-emerge in a post-apocalyptic world, its magic and power being able to rise again with the fall of humanity. In the Pathfinder games, the Tatterdemalion is an evil, magical entity associated with unwanted things. In the Shannara book series, the Tatterdemalions are magical creatures that are born from the memories of dead children, and are described as a sort of fairy creature. Being born from the dead memories explains their lack of general knowledge, like where they came from, anything about their families, that sort of thing. The Tatterdemalion are said to be born of magic, fully grown in their childlike appearance, and only live for a short time. Those that find someone to prey upon will live for a short time longer, but still, the mental capacity of a human doesn't stand much of a long-term chance with a Tatterdemalion. Once its job is done with its prey, or for those that find no prey and the magic that gave them life weakens and can no longer contain those lost memories, it collapses from existence, those residual memories and dreams being scattered into the wind. Though whatever became of those previously mentioned dead children is never addressed. It's the lost memories of the dead children aspect that got me thinking. Could the Tatterdemalion be an American adaptation of the European changeling myths? After all, folklore is nothing but a living tradition, the stories and beliefs shaped by the surrounding landscape and the anxieties of those that live there. And with the majority of settlers to both the Ozarks and the Appalachian Mountains being Scotch-Irish, the connection to the changeling wasn't a hard leap for me to take. In Irish, Scottish, and Germanic folklore, the changeling was a sickly but wise offspring of either a fairy, elf, or troll, found in the cribs of human parents after their own healthy human child had been silently taken. The human parents were left to believe that their own healthy child was out there somewhere, lost and scared, but with no way to ever find them. Many of the times, the changelings that were left behind were seen as normal human children to outsiders, only the parents of the missing child seeing the creature's true nature. The result of the presence of a changeling was the emotional toll of the loss of their own child, while the care of the sick and unhealthy changeling was a drain on their resources, something that was usually already scarce as it was. Ultimately, a changeling was a drain on the human condition itself, much like that of the Tatterdemalion. Both the Tatterdemalion and the changeling appear as a deceptive, wise, and manipulative child in need of care, with the changeling itself appearing as sickly, lost, and a ragged, non-human creature. In essence, it was a fitting description for the literal word Tatterdemalion. When we use the actual definition of Tatterdemalion, the changeling and the Tatterdemalion are one and the same. The Tatterdemalion itself follows the blueprint of the changeling almost exactly, except now, rather than being the offspring of the Fae, it's born of the deep dark woods of the Ozarks themselves, but still a feral child with an unnatural, unsettling charm. Another similarity that they share is that they must be invited into human circles. We never come across any instances of either a changeling or a Tatterdemalion hunting or forcing its way into human interaction. True, the changeling is left in place of a human child, but it's the people's choice to try and care for it. The same is true with the Tatterdemalion. Sure, if you encounter one out in the woods, you have the option of being like, nope, sorry kid, you're on your own. But with both a sickly infant or a lost child, the changelings and the Tatterdemalions both place their wagers on the compassion of humans. Their end goal gives us another similarity: the destruction of the human household. With the changeling, it preyed mostly on your resources and emotions. It consumed food relentlessly as it grew, while its illness deprived the family of labor that a healthy child would provide at home. The emotional and physical stress would build and build on the family, proving to be a slow and agonizing process. The same is true with the Tatterdemalion, just a little more abstract. The Tatterdemalion seems to be more focused on your mental health more directly. The same is true with the changeling, but just in a more indirect way. The Tatterdemalion seems to be an evolution of the changeling of sorts. In a time where the fear of starvation is less than it was in medieval times, it's replaced with the fear of burnout and unexplained chronic illness. They both operate as a supernatural parasite, depriving you of the ability to survive and thrive. That's an interesting way to look at it, as a sort of evolution. But evolution is in constant motion, right? Have we ended up with the Tatterdemalion, waiting for its next step in evolution, or is it already here, amongst us? An evil, supernatural being disguised as a lost child needing help. One that can only come into the human condition or household if invited in. All of that reminds me of another legend related to children. One that you'd better leave them be if you ever encounter them. The black-eyed children. A relatively new legend when compared to its counterparts. The legend of the black-eyed children seemed to have cropped up in 1998 out of Texas, and quickly had corresponding reports crop up all over the U.S. The original report had two children trying to bum a ride to a nearby theater, but the driver of the vehicle declined. He knew something was off with these two kids immediately. He described them as having unnervingly pale skin, and their eyes were completely black, They stood there in the night with an unnatural stillness, and even though they only asked for a ride to the theater, their speech seemed awkward and unnatural. The driver was overwhelmed with such a sense of dread that he sped off, leaving the black-eyed children behind. As reports started to crop up and be compiled, a more clear picture of these beings began to emerge. The black-eyed children all seemed to be described as appearing between the ages of 6 and 16. As opposed to the ragged and feral appearance of the Tatterdemalion, the black-eyed children are usually described as clean, but still dressed in slightly outdated clothing. They are always described as unusually pale, and of course, with the deep, piercing, unblinking, completely black eyes from where they get their name. Their movements and speech are described as unsettlingly calm, no matter the circumstance, but in a monotone way, almost robotic in a way, with a vocabulary not natural to their appeared age. Their methods are always centered around consent. They approach lone people in a car or at home late at night and ask for permission to come in or for help. They always need a ride home, or need to use the phone to call their parents, or simply ask not to be left out in the cold. Very reminiscent of the older vampire or fae folklore, where they need permission to cross your threshold. And what happens if permission is ever granted? Well, no one knows for sure. There's never been a survivor to tell their tale. For those that have had an encounter and was smart enough to deny the black-eyed children entry, always report a feeling of dread, and afterwards they feel physically drained, sick, or traumatized emotionally. A more rapid onset of the conditions reported from those that encounter a changeling or a tatterdemalion. Witnesses of the black-eyed children often report an intense, paralyzing fear. They tell of how the children show an irrational urge to gain entry into your home or car. Sometimes they try to use coercion or an almost hypnotic element to get what they want. The survivors of those encounters report the feeling of dread, sickness, impending doom, all the combined long-term effects of a tatterdemalion, all packaged into one sudden encounter of a brief few seconds. If this is the continuing evolution of a changeling to the tatterdemalion, and now to the black-eyed children, then they are getting stronger, getting more emboldened. They've left their homes of the Fae and the hills of the Ozarks and are now amongst us, adapting to modernity and civilizations that have cropped up around them. If it is not a supernatural evolution, then these are 3 separate beings, 3 separate creatures spread out around the world, heightening your chances of an encounter with at least one of them. When put into that situation, how will you come out? Would you fall under the charm of a lost child needing help? Or would you have the spiritual discernment to see things for what they truly are? Do you have the willpower to handle the repercussions of being wrong?